Hi everybody, Nick Blazer here with another position analysis video. Today we're going to look at early game tempo hits, specifically like the loose hit on the ace. Someone had asked about that in the comments, so I thought that was a cool one to talk about a little bit. But just really quickly, I want to share with you beforehand all my tournament schedules so you know about the cool events coming up. Got Gibraltar in the beginning of February and then San Antonio right after that. Beginning of March is the Rack London Invitational near London in Birmingham, and Loot Rocky right after that in March. And then I'll be part of the Cherry Blossom Tournament in April in Virginia, too. I'll be live in London, Texas, and Virginia, and I'll be doing a remote setup for the Gibraltar and Loot Rocky ones. So tune in for commentary on those. But okay, back to the position. Those 5-4 tempo hits to begin with. Let me show you real quick that the solution by a decent margin is indeed hitting loose on the ace, but it's only 32 millipoints behind to just split again or instead. So I do want to, a common thing that I end up talking to my students about a lot in the opening is that this magnitude of mistakes isn't that big, and it's important to also focus on how good it is to just make a splitting play like this instead too. That this has quite a bit of value in the opening game, and it's a little bit better to hit on the ace again. Just like in some different situations, it's a little bit better to slot instead. This is more so, but these are pretty close. And actually, if we look at the 5-2, these are the two fives that make a lot of sense to hit loose on the ace for a tempo hit afterward. And this one's very close. So we can talk a little bit about the differences between them. But the way that a lot of people are taught to memorize this second roll position is that we hit loose on the five to disconnect this six split. And it helps us remember that whenever our opponent splits with the six, we should tempo hit on the ace. And it's a good thing to remember, but maybe it'd be more useful to think about the actual strategic concepts that are going on here, because it's part of, like, in part, we do reduce the rolls when we tempo hit on the ace that that can link up with the 7 point. It goes from 17 numbers that would make the bar point down to six numbers. So we reduce it by quite a bit. But some of those should be duplicated with numbers that would do nice things on the other side. And I don't know for sure on like a 6-1 what we want to do. Do we want to make the anchor? Do we want to make the offensive point? Things like this. So it's not like all 17 are great. But there is for sure some disconnection. But I think to me, that's part of it. But it's more like the concept of a tempo hit becomes a little bit more important in this kind of position where our opponent has a ton of good rolls make the bar point and they have the builder on the other side. Um, and we can unstack by doing that too. And the other part, there's a hit and split concept in the other game too. We like to do that. It kind of protects our ability to split the back checkers when we hit loose, because then our opponent can't point on head. The best they can do in general is hit back loose. And so this, I think, accounts for the magnitude between the 5-4, why this is important now by 0.032, and why it's a little bit closer with the two, is that in the 5-4, if we just split, we're splitting under the gun here, where our opponent's going to have a lot of numbers that are going to point on head here. So it's a little more important to protect that split with the tempo hit. Where with the 5-2, as we saw, if we go back to that, they're a lot closer in this one. So yeah, I think just the general idea is the tempo hit, that sometimes we have to buy that when our opponent has a lot of good rolls, and it's only, along with that, we get to unstack the heavy 6 point. There's a lot of good things that can happen with this, but like it's hard for the impurity of that checker on the ace point long term and the risk of being down in the race to be made up for by that tempo gain for just one roll. In the early game, I talk a lot about that too, about like making some sort of strategic point or something like this that's going to persist for the whole game tends to outweigh thinking too much about the immediate next roll. And this tempo hit situation is almost an exception to that. When our opponent's going to have too many ways to make a crucial point, then we have to go for a tempo hit and just try to slow that down a little bit. And here, I think it's more example of that. And maybe we don't do that in some Marginal positions like a 1-4 after our opponent splits 4-1. Now they have a pretty good building structure here, right? Oh, we would hit twice here though, so that's going to prevent it too. That's not a good example. What is like a 4-3? Maybe we do tempo hit here, right? To prevent the building? Yeah, another common like opening where this is something that makes sense to do against these builders in the outfield. Are going to create a lot of different good productive roles for our opponents, and if we do too little with that, then too many of our opponents' roles are good. But so maybe it's harder to see this tempo gain in the early game, but some places where it should get a lot easier. I wanted to share a couple of those too for reference back to these early game decisions. Some places where it gets easier for me to see it are against structures like this for blacks checkers, where they have a ton of material in the zone. They're threatening to make a new point on almost all the rolls, maybe a crucial one that makes a 4 prime and puts us in a lot of trouble. And if that happens, we're in big trouble. And maybe getting a checker sent back doesn't really compare to that as bad, right? Like if we can keep them dancing, we have good times here. But as soon as our opponent starts to get developed this, we could be in very big trouble on the next roll if our opponent makes a 4 prime while we're stuck back here. So in a position like this, it is pretty key to go for the tempo hit. And I think these like 8, 7, 6 with stacks of checkers well distributed is a common structure where you'll see a lot of tempo hits come up. Another one that I kind of constructed before this video, was some structure like this, where we don't have as pure of a structure already. We have a board made a little bit, but if our opponent makes the 5 point, we're really in big trouble. And if they make the bar point, it's pretty strong too. And so when our opponent has a structure where they just have a ton of ways to make a good board, we're in a reasonable game playing something like a blot hitting contest. We don't mind the checker back as much. Tempo hits get very important in positions like these as well. And so as the game develops, I feel like the magnitude of these decisions always kinds of grows as they get closer to decisive for the game. But of course, in the opening position, when we're deciding after our opponent splits whether to hit on the ace or not, we'll look at the 6-4 as well. Same idea. Um, there's a lot of different ways this game could go, and it's not likely to be over afterward. But we do a lot better when we hit here, and we see the magnitude of the difference increases when both the two split would be stepping under the gun of this 16 point or this checker here, um, because it could point on head with a lot of 6 rolls, and it's a better builder. It's just going to make more points, right? So tempo gets more important here, and probably with the 5-4, it's pretty key as well. Yeah, we're under a lot of pressure, and it's about the same as the last one. But hopefully that helps you a little bit see how we're actually thinking about this loose hit on the ace here. Um, if you haven't experimented with just blot hitting contests in general too, I talk about that in a previous video. That might help you see why it's not so scary to be hit and sent back. But structurally, if our opponent gets to make such a very like nice point or point on head while we split, and we're just behind, like that's a tough start to the game. And so we slow that progress down by hitting on the ace a lot in the opening when our opponent splits with the 6. I hope that loose tempo hit helps you kind of understand why you might make a play like that. Hopefully, it helps you see it in some of those more middle game positions that I showed as well. And I'll be back with more position analysis videos every Monday and Thursday. So I'll see you soon. Bye, everybody.